Hi there and good evening. Welcome to the Jim Bohannon Show from Westwood One Radio. We're at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Online, find us at jimbotalk.net. Well, you've heard about the marriage penalty, right? Some married couples actually have to pay more in income taxes than they would if they were two single people with the exact same combined income. I knew a couple who put off marriage for that very reason. Well, this especially holds true when both halves of the couple are employed. Well, guess what? There's now a new marriage penalty to be concerned with, and that is something that works this way. It comes with the Affordable Care Act and its system of subsidies. For married couples with two incomes, the likelihood of qualifying for a subsidy drops as total income rises. Yet, if each person signed up for an Obamacare plan separately, at least one member of the couple would likely qualify for a subsidy. Now, this has led some couples toward a difficult decision: pay higher health care bills or divorce and save money. Could be thousands of dollars in some cases, depending on income levels. It's not an idle decision to make. But is divorce really the answer, or are there other alternatives? Let's talk about that tonight with divorce attorney Melinda Eitzen, who joins us this evening, partner in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area-based law practice of Duffee and Eitzen. Good evening, Melinda. Nice to have you with us on the program tonight.
Thank you, Jim. I'm glad to be here.
Have I adequately outlined this situation here as regards the option facing some couples?
Yes, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, but not if my health insurance bill goes up.
Oh, that's just delightful. What are we talking about here in terms of the amounts of money that we're talking about?
Well, like you said, it's really going to depend on their situation, but in an example I was looking at, it was about $4,000. And that's, not a couple of $100 like you think you might save when you change your car insurance. In this instance, it was a situation where one of the parties individually, if they can make up to about $45,000 and still get the subsidies, and this is what it's all about, is getting these government subsidies. But combined, they can only make up to about $62,000. So you can see, doing the math, they could get divorced, still live together as they wish, and make up to $90,000 combined, and both get subsidies.
And again, we're talking about a lot of money here, a substantial chunk of change. So let's say if you have unusual financial obligations, that could be a not just an incentive, which I can see just off the bat for anybody, but in some cases it might make the difference between, say, keeping your home or something like that, depending on what your personal financial obligations may be. I can see where some people might say, well, in this day and age, who gets married anyway? Everybody's walking around procreating and living together like marriage is just sort of something that is extremely optional. So is that big a deal?
Well, and this is what you have to think about. There's a lot more to consider than their health insurance costs, even if you're purely looking at it from a financial standpoint. One of the reasons that the gay population is dying to be allowed to be married is because there is financial protection under the law when you're legally married that you do not get when you're not legally married. So there's a lot of other financial things they'd want to think about and be concerned with, because they might save $4,000 by not getting married, but they might lose a lot more depending on the laws in their state and their circumstance.
Are we talking here about something that could have been foreseen? In other words, if you were rewriting the law here, would you in fact have been able to assuming that you were of a mind to write a national health care law along the lines outlined, would it have been that difficult to have written the law in such a way that you did not provide an economic incentive for divorce?
I know. I don't think the government wants to create a marriage penalty. And in most cases, we actually have an incentive to be married under income tax laws. I even have a couple right now that I'm divorcing, and they're all done. Their paperwork is complete, They are going to wait, however, until January 2nd because they want one more year of filing jointly their income taxes. So historically, in most cases, we have been given, the government has given us an incentive to be married and valued the family. But in this instance, not. And it does seem like they could have drafted around this. Now, it's easy for us to say that now. It's a huge law, thousands of pages, multiple pieces, so it's a complicated law. But it seems like this part, when they're doing the mathematic equations, it would be pretty easy to see what this result could be.
1-866-50-JIMBO is our number, 1-866-505-4626. And I'm wondering how many people have even really looked into this. Of course, we've already seen the slow kickoff of signing up at healthcare.gov or through state exchanges and the like. And it's not all just because of the technical glitches. Some of it apparently just falls into the category of lack of interest. These are the people out there who are the parasites, in my view. These are the people who just don't care to spend money on health insurance because if something catastrophic really enters their life, well, they figure the rest of us will bail them out. And I say, unfortunately, probably the rest of us will. I would let them die as roadkill, personally. Because you have no, seriously, I mean, you have an obligation not to be a burden on other people, and so you can skip the damn jacuzzi and cover yourself. Otherwise, I believe the law ought to state specifically that if you have chosen, you have the wherewithal to provide for insurance, and you chose not to, that you should be specifically denied from any tax-supported hospital, clinic, what have you. But be that as it may, do you see this as being a large problem in terms of the numbers of people involved?
You know, it's hard to tell that yet, and I'm with you. I think that if people aren't willing to be covered, they should be penalized, and the Obamacare law does have a penalty. People are supposed to get coverage now. So, and there's some exceptions to that. So we will see some more penalties, which will be appealing to you and I and many other people, I bet, many of your listeners. But the website, when it works, you can go on to the healthcare.gov website and do a little estimate of your costs and savings with your circumstances. And I went on the website just before we got on the air today to see, is it working? And it appears to be intermittently working. So right now you can get on and do your business, but then you're going to have to get back on Tuesday to resubmit it because they're doing some work right now. But you could try as an individual to go on and see, is this going to affect you and how much is it going to affect you?
It does seem like, again, something that could seriously have been avoided. Now, if I'm not mistaken, this marriage penalty that I mentioned in the very beginning, didn't they address that not too many years ago, the marriage penalty?
You're exactly right. On the whole, and it does, always depend on your circumstance, but on the whole, it's more advantageous to file married filing jointly. And some people time either their marriage or their divorce. If they're close to the end of the year, they might time that because it's all about what is your marital status on December 31st. You could be married on December 31st and get the advantage of married filing jointly, even though you weren't married until the one day of the whole year. It's an important day.
Now, aren't there some people who, in fact, have done an annual divorce and remarriage, and then an annual divorce and remarriage? In other words, I read about one couple that actually did this, I'm sure, and it again, it points out an obvious foible in the law, but it worked for them, and it obviously didn't bother them enough to not go about this. But I gather that was the deal. They would get divorced. And at some point, some date, whatever was the appropriate date, they qualified for whatever benefits were allowed, and then they promptly got remarried. And it was an annual thing. It was almost like a renewal of vows, only in this case the renewal became necessary.
That's hysterical. That would really they would have to be in a unique tax situation for that to make sense, because where I live in Dallas, Texas, to file for divorce alone, the filing fee is over $300. So So before you've paid a lawyer a single dollar, you have to pay the county $300 just for the privilege of requesting a divorce. So there are costs involved in getting divorced. It's not free, and it could be really expensive just depending on the circumstance. So they would need to figure that into their calculation.
Stay with us. More to come on the Jim Bohannon Show as we learn more about, again, the bizarre ins and outs of Obamacare. And we've all seen the problems with the website and unintended consequences, although some would argue that a few of those unintended consequences were quite intended. And we'll look at this latest thing now, which seems that under the system of Obamacare subsidies, if you fall into the right income levels, particularly for a married couple, and as our guest, Attorney Melinda Eitzen, noted, these are not unusual incomes. These are pretty smack dab in the middle of middle class to lower middle class Americana, that it might be a financial advantage to get divorced for health care coverage. And in some cases, it might be a substantial financial advantage to get divorced. More to come at 1-866-50-JIMBO. Our guest, Melinda Eitzen, has her website, MyDallasFamilyAttorney.com, MyDallasFamilyAttorney.com. We're not urging people to get divorced for health insurance purposes. We're merely pointing out circumstances such as they are. We report it, you decide, as somebody once said. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. We're talking about a new twist on the marriage penalty, not just a situation of income taxes, but a situation of the subsidies available under the Affordable Care Act. And as we were talking a bit about this just a second ago, Melinda Eitzen, we were talking about some of those penalties that are involved here. There are penalties in the Obamacare legislation, some of which were built in deliberately, we are told, that is to say, provide an incentive for people's behavior. Some of these penalties were kind of weird in that they don't penalize very much in some cases. This one that we're talking about tonight, an unintended penalty, certainly seems to. But some of the built-in penalties to get people to comply or to get companies to provide health care, for example, are mighty tiny penalties. And it seems like that the actual incentive is such that you pay the penalty. In other words, if you're an employer and you, I guess it's over 50 employees, and you have to pay a penalty or provide coverage for your employees, the penalty is so much lower than the cost of coverage that the actual incentive is, even if you have had employees you've known for decades and you love for them to have the health plan, from a business standpoint, it's crazy to keep your plan, pay the penalty, and dump your employees.
I really think the penalty is getting passed on in that instead of covering people, some companies are having to lay off people. And how horrible to go from, I didn't have health insurance, but at least I had a job, to now I don't even have a job. So, you know, Big Brother, whenever Big Brother gets involved in private enterprise, it doesn't always work out so well. Because we are not a communist or a socialist state. Thank goodness.
Yes, there's a lot to be said for that. We offer serious encouragement to that notion. Now, as regards this particular penalty, are there ways around this? Frankly, are there little tricks, stupid CPA tricks, for want of a better term? Maybe Letterman could try that some night. Stupid CPA tricks whereby you could still qualify for these subsidies and not actually get divorced.
Well, that's a good question. I think it's going to be interesting to see what loopholes we find, because that typically is what starts happening. We start looking at, what if we did this, what if we did that? And I think people are going to be encouraged to do that, and the CPAs are going to be looking for a legal way to avoid what hopefully was an unintended penalty. In the meantime, individuals are going to have to start budgeting. Families are going to have to start budgeting tighter than we're already budgeting, because nobody was really planning for this. We couldn't measure the individual effect in advance. So to suddenly have a $4,000 difference in your budget for the year is pretty serious. But I think that's what people are going to have to do. They're going to have to eat out less or make other adjustments so that they can stay married and have health insurance.
Although, of course, when you speak of maybe $4,000 a year, that's a lot of eating out. I mean,
I know,
in some cases, while that is a theoretical answer, but again, your eating out budget would have to be considerable. I mean, if you fall under the right income levels, $4,000. You've got to be making a chunk of change. You've got to be, I would think that for that kind of penalty, you've got to be pretty much in the top 1 or 2% of income in the country before you can shrug your shoulders at that kind of a penalty. Say, well, whatever, that's one less trip to France this year. I mean, most people aren't making decisions like that.
No, the people this is really impacting are middle America, and they don't have $4,000 in their budget that's easy to carve out. There isn't, like you said, it isn't just a matter of eating out. So that's going to be tough for people, and I think it's going to be challenging, and maybe people are going to have to go to extremes and even get additional jobs. So I think it's going to be tough. I do, and I think that when you look at the Affordable Care Act, the way they decide how much your individual health care is going to cost, they look at a few factors. They look at how old you are, and they're only allowed to look at a few factors. How old you are, where you live. So if you live in a more expensive part of the country, your health care can be more expensive. They look at how many people are in your family, and if you smoke. So that's the one unhealthy thing that's really going to penalize you is smoking, apparently. So that's one thing. Stop smoking. Save money on cigarettes. Again, not enough. It's not going to be enough money on cigarettes. But those are the things that they consider when they're figuring out how much your individual health insurance will be.
I'm wondering about how much of the public really cares that much about getting married anymore anyway. As I noted earlier, it seems to be a very generational thing, but there seem to be so many young people these days who don't seem to care one way or the other. I mean, it's like this whole discussion tonight is just academic as can be. Well, married, not married, whatever. We'll have kids. I mean, obviously, the number of kids being born out of wedlock, I mean, they can't all just be brain dead stupid, can they? This must be a conscious choice on the part of some.
Well, I'm in the South, Jim.
Well, so am I, but I recognize that a lot of others aren't, and I don't like the president.
I know. I think that you're right, that it's more acceptable to divorce than it was our parents' generation, our grandparents' generation. And frankly, from my perspective, that's a good thing, not just because I'm a divorce lawyer, but because people were living in miserable situations, abusive situations, miserable situations, and people don't have to do that anymore.
All right.
It is socially acceptable to divorce.
I want to come back and talk about the social acceptability of just not getting married in the first place and other aspects of all of this tonight. Again, under Obamacare, it may be a lot cheaper if you divorce for health care insurance. Back in a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. And we're talking a bit about this penalty, which we will assume. We will give the benefit of the doubt. We will assume this was an unintended consequence of Obamacare, that in qualifying for the system of subsidies based on various income standards, that depending on your exact circumstances, but a number of people in the general range of middle America, roughly the median national income, may find, if they're both working, that as a married couple, they don't qualify for a subsidy. If they are divorced, legally divorced, even if you're still living together, that you, in fact, may qualify. And the subsidy difference here could be thousands of dollars. Divorce attorney Melinda Eitzen is our guest tonight from the Dallas area law firm Duffee and Eitzen. Their website, mydallasfamilyattorney.com. Now then, today, the young people, we both agree that we're traditionalists, but many people are not today. And for people for whom this is not a big deal, I suppose that getting a divorce, let's face it, I mean, even a cheap divorce is a lot less than the cost of the subsidy of $4,000. You don't have to especially if it's amicable and nobody's going to be hassling over who gets the ottoman or the kids, right?
Yeah, if that's the only thing they're concerned with. Now, there are financial benefits, especially to the lesser earning spouse, especially in a traditional situation. If one of the spouses is foregone career and they're taking care of the kids, they're much better off staying married, even with the marriage penalty of the Obamacare, because they're going to get so many other financial benefits of being married. But if they didn't have that consideration, if they were similar wage earners, then unfortunately they might be better off not married, at least from a purely financial standpoint.
Exactly. And again, for some people, marriage doesn't seem to be that big a deal. I mean, it's certainly, I think, as a society as a whole, I think it's obvious that marriage is nowhere near the big deal it once was. There were not only questions of tradition, there were questions of being ostracized. I mean, I certainly am old enough to recall the term living in sin. There are maybe young people today for whom that term is not familiar. That means that you're living in the same house, presumably sharing the same bed, but you ain't hitched. It was called living in sin, and it brought, severe penalties. I mean, in a tight-knit community, you would have severe problems at the job, at the church, at the Rotary Club, or the Kiwanis Club, what have you. You would be ostracized. We don't see that much anymore, do we?
No, much less shunning, which I think is positive.
I'll put it this way. There are some aspects of society for which shunning is not a bad thing. Now, maybe you should say it shouldn't apply to divorce, but there are some areas we don't get embarrassed out of doing anything anymore. I mean,
I know.
All we have is the law. In many cases, if people will do something, and there's no societal nudge in that direction.
We need some loving shunning, perhaps.
Well, okay, fine. If you want to call it loving shunning, call it societal tough love. I'm easy. I'm a talk show host. Euphemisms are fine with me, but it amounts to the same thing. If you know what's good for you, you'll get your act together. I mean, and that's again, I think there's a problem in a society where only the sanctions of the law move people in a given direction. Now, I realize that we may be talking about your turf here, but I think that's a real problem when there is no such thing as shame.
Right.
I mean, in some cases, again, I don't really find anything terribly sinful if you're not married. I think there are serious legal ramifications. Have you had in being a divorce attorney? Have you run across people who had this wonderful, loving relationship, and marriage would just mess it up? And so, sure, we're going to live together. We're going to share the bills and the household chores. We're going to have kids, and it'll all work out fine because we do not need the sanctions of the law as they apply to married couples to make this work. Have you run across people in your practice of divorce law who have come to rue the day they made that decision?
Well, yes, and sometimes what ends up happening is they end up claiming that they have a common law marriage. In Texas, you can have a common law marriage, so you don't have a formal ceremony, you're not formally married, but if you agree between yourselves that you're married, if you live together as a married couple, and you hold yourself out as married, then you are married. You're just as legally married as someone who had a ceremony.
Now go ahead, please, continue.
So what happens to those people is maybe they start out saying, we don't need to be married, what's the importance of the piece of paper? But then they reach a point where the other one wants to leave, and it's going to be really bad for them financially. But if they were married, it would be better. So then we have a lawsuit where it's like a two-part divorce. Part one, are they common law married? Part two, if they are, divorce.
Now, you talk about hold yourself forth as married. I'm not sure how far that goes, and my guess is that there are differing interpretations of that. I don't know very many people who say, hi, this is Mr. and Mrs. Smith here, and this is my significant other, Joni. We're shacked up together. We're not married. We're living in sin. I mean, nobody does that. I mean, if you don't say anything, but you're just living together, I'll put it this way. I find a real problem with a law that assumes that at some point that especially if it's an ill-defined point, that suddenly, wham, you're married. You know, you're not married, you're not married, you're not married.
Yeah, married on accident.
You just went past midnight, you're married. What, as it has been applied in actual practice, just exactly what is the point at which someone wakes up the next morning and you're stuck in a common law marriage that you had nothing to do with?
Yeah, married on accident. So the holding out examples, they're everything from you're at church and you say, this is my wife, please meet my wife, or all the way to filling out a legal document, like your tax return, like your health insurance. And it's kind of the reverse of our situation now. Before, the only way people could get their partner on their health insurance was to be married to them. So they would fib a little and claim they were married to them for purposes of their health insurance. Well, that is legally significant because they're committing fraud if they aren't married. So by signing up, they were holding themselves out. So the more examples they have and the more serious they are, like tax fraud or health insurance fraud, the more likely they are to be common law married.
You know, the state, it can be argued, has a vested interest in encouraging people to be married. It certainly provides greater stability for society, greater stability in terms of the rearing of children and so on and so forth. I don't understand what the vested interest is for health insurance companies to be in on this. Why do they care if somebody's married or not?
Historically, well, it would allow them to cover less people at a lower price point. So the people would have to go get individual coverage at a much higher price point.
Wouldn't that be to their advantage? And wouldn't it be better for the insurance company to take everybody a la carte like that instead of little family units?
Oh, yes. So that's why you had to be married, and they wouldn't allow. We're just seeing in the gay lesbian community where there are some companies allowing domestic partners to be on their health insurance without being legally married. And that's been coming a long time, and it's just barely coming still. But historically, that was not available.
More to come.
People would,
yeah. Go ahead. People would what?
They'd accidentally get married. Through common law marriage. I
have always felt that you could blow that out of the water if you ever took that to court. That's the dumbest thing I ever heard, common law marriage. I mean, that's just the tax collector trying to nail somebody there. More to come on our Jim Bohannon Show discussion tonight about divorce, an option for Obamacare, in just a moment. Welcome back to the Jim Bohannon Show at 1-866-50-JIMBO, 1-866-505-4626. Divorce attorney Melinda Eitzen is our guest, and partner in the Dallas area law firm Duffee and Eitzen. Their website, mydallasfamilyattorney.com. What's the state of divorce right now as you see it in America? I guess the conventional cynicism would have that we're getting divorced like never before.
Well, as the economy improves, divorces increase because more money gives people more options. So before, when we were in the recession, oh my goodness, they couldn't get divorced. Their 401k was half the size it was. They couldn't sell their house, but things are improving. So the divorce business is rapid.
So it's going well. How much, we know that if you get really crazy, you can spend an awful lot of money on divorces, and you can argue about, who gets custody of the French poodle I knew of a story once here in the nation's capital area of a couple. They settled the house and all of the income and all the assets, custody of the kids, that went by like nothing. They fought for years over 4 season tickets to the Washington Redskins. It can get crazy. But you recall the absolutely weirdest divorce case you ever had? You may leave out names if you wish, but there must have been a few.
Oh gosh, absolutely. Well, you're right. People will fight over crazy things. I had one case where at the very beginning of the lawsuit, the husband kidnapped the cat because he knew that was the hot button. So it was a collaborative divorce, which is a more amicable process, but we had to spend 3 meetings trying to get the cat back. So people do harass each other and try to push each other's buttons and fight over things that are not reasonable, and that's because the emotions are involved. And they're not in their business mind, they're in their emotional mind, and sometimes things go wild.
Has it ever been your job, or let's put it this way, not your job, but have you taken it on as your job, you and the other divorce attorney, to say, look, we need to knock some sense into these two clowns. I know we're both making a nice piece of change off of this, but this is ridiculous. Have you ever sat down with the opposing counsel and said, let's play marriage counselor?
Oh, absolutely. And I tell my clients when I think they are asking me to do something unreasonable that's just going to cost a lot of money, I say, look, you can put your kids through college or my kids through college. And it's a lot better to put your own kids through college. Even though I would like for you to put mine through, it's not good for you. Just to try to wake them up a little bit to what's going on.
Fair enough. Susan calls in from Kalispell, Montana tonight. We hope that this is an academic inquiry. Susan, what's on your mind?
Actually, I just want to make a comment.
Okay.
My husband and I have been married 35 years. We own everything we own. No debt, no mortgage. Mm-hmm. We earn too much money for any kind of subsidy.
Right.
My husband's on Medicare. I am not. I'm only 58. And when I have been exploring what I might have to pay for insurance under the ACA, it would be $14,000 a year. I just saw an eye, ear, and nose throat guy because I've had nasal drip for 3 months. Mm-hmm. It cost me $225 cash out of pocket. That would be a quarter of my premium, not including any deductible. So did I think about divorce? Yes. I called two attorneys who are personal friends and a personal attorney, and I said, why not get divorced? And they kind of listened, and it's like we have no children. We own everything. Every asset we have could be protected with civil agreements. And it's like, I'm sorry, I paid insurance for 25 years through my job. At this point, why should I beggar myself for $15,000 a year just to have the benefit of health insurance, which does not mean health care?
Well, in some cases, it can mean health care. I mean, there are cases where if you don't have insurance, you're not going to have coverage.
And I understand all of that, but for us personally, no.
Okay. Any thoughts, Melinda Eitzen?
Yeah, let me ask you a question. Are you both retired?
No, we're thinking about retirement.
Okay, so this is my tip.
We work for a nonprofit which cannot afford insurance.
Okay, I'm going to give you a free tip. If you decided to divorce, then part of your agreement needs to be how would you handle everyone's future income?
Sure.
And treat it like an alimony payment to the lesser earning spouse or something like that, and make it contractual alimony for the rest of your life.
Yep.
Even though, in fact, they would continue to live together and love each other. Is that what I'm hearing you saying, Melinda?
Yeah, I'm just,
okay.
My job is to hope for the best and prepare for the worst.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, and see, we each have our own retirement. His is greater than mine, so it's not like we don't have assets, savings.
Okay, quick final question, and then we're going to take a break here. Is any of your retirement are any of your retirement payments predicated on the fact that you're married?
No.
Okay, well.
We own our own.
So you've got options there, and again, that's something to think about. More to come. We'll be back in a moment. Good to have you with us on the Jim Bohannon Show tonight. Melinda Eitzen, our guest partner in the Dallas area law firm of Duffee and Eitzen. Their website, mydallasfamilyattorney.com. She specializes in big money divorces, we're told, and custody modifications, paternity cases, premarital agreements, and all facets of family law. These prenups. Are those all totally enforceable, or are there ways to weasel out of those?
They are usually enforced. There are exceptions that I always tell people, expect that this will be enforced. Do not sign it or agree to it if you do not want to have it enforced against you.
The common law marriage concept, is that essentially the same thing as what used to be called palimony?
No, I think palimony is a different situation, but it's similar, and it probably was kind of the what led us into common law marriage.
Okay. In addition, I'm curious about custody modifications. What does that entail exactly? I mean, you make a deal, you split things up. Under what circumstances is there justification for modifying things?
So if you have children, when you divorce, until the children are 18, either party can go back and ask that the schedule with the children be changed or that the child support be changed. And so sometimes we have a custody fight, they're divorced, it's over, and then 2 years later we have another custody fight.
In terms of child welfare, child payments, as it were, let's say that you're divorced and the wife gets the kids, and you have to make payments of X bucks a month, and then you lose your job. To what extent can the court say, well, produce the money out of thin air? Because I've heard horror stories on this program.
Well, the best advice is the minute you lose your job, you need to file a motion to modify that child support. The courts will modify it down while you're jobless and while you're looking for a job. And then once you find a new situation, they can always modify it back up. But you need to act quickly. They will, if you wait, because you think you're going to get a job and it's all going to work out, you might not be able to look back to that date of job loss.
All right. Stay on the line. We'll speak off air. Again, pleasure to have on Melinda Eitzen tonight, divorce attorney, and we're looking at the new marriage penalty, which involves the subsidies available under Obamacare. Never a dull moment under the law these days. More to come with our guest. I'm Jim Bohannon, and this is Westwood One.